Hello, Squirrel Squad, and we have new squads joining. Yay! All the time. I somehow have to do this every time. I hate not to see that beautiful cross up there that Helen made and Sue's Nut House sign. Sometimes I miss Kathy's Sammy Squirrel right there on the sign. Anyway, I just can't get it all in, but it is gorgeous. Everything y'all send in and your cards. And then I have more cards over here. Love y'all to death. And my squirrel earrings in. Oh, you know what I've been forgetting to do? And I bet you our junior squirrel has been noticing. Little Miss Katerina. And her grandmother just keeps telling me how, and I hope you've been reading the comments, when Linda Jean House tells us about her little girl, she's just taken this story all in. What a little genius she is at 2 years old. She's been saying she has the magic in her and all the stuff. Read Linda's comments. It's great. So, hey, Katerina, you little smart thing, you. And hello, new squirrels and squirrels that have been with me for a long time. And y'all know what? We are going to finish this book right now. I just freaked out. I should have looked. We're at 98%, I just noticed. And I scrolled up, and this is the last chapter. 27. So, oh my gosh, I was going to do a poll and let us pick the book. I do this every time. I noticed several books mentioned. I noticed Little Women was mentioned. I noticed, was it Madonna that said, and several people maybe have said, To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm not sure, and I meant to check to see if it's in public domain. I can't remember when it was written. I might look it up after this. We'll see. Let's go ahead and finish this. Mr. Craven scarcely heard her last words, and he's talking about Mrs. Medlock. In the garden, he said. And after he had sent Mrs. Medlock away, he had asked her where Colin was, and that's what she said. He stood and repeated it again and again, in the garden. He had to make an effort to bring himself back to the place he was standing in, and when he felt he was on earth again, he turned and went out of the room. He took his way, as Mary had done, through the door, in the shrubbery and among the laurels and fountain beds. The fountain was playing now and was encircled by beds of brilliant autumn flowers. He crossed the lawn and turned into the long walk by the ivied walls. Seems like I've read this before, so I may be going back I'm not sure, but then, I read that one time and the sound had gone, so I'm not sure, but that won't hurt us to go back. He felt as if he did not walk quickly, but slowly, and his eyes were on the path. He felt as if he were being drawn back to the place he had so long forsaken, and he did not know why. As he drew near to it, his step became still more slow. He knew where the door was, even though the ivy hung thick over it, but he did not know exactly where it lay that buried the key. So he stopped and stood still, looking about him, and almost the moment after he had paused, he started and listened. After asking himself if he were walking in a dream, the ivy hung thick over the door. The key was buried under the shrubs. No human being had passed that portal for 10 lonely years, and yet, inside the garden, there were sounds. There were the sounds of running, scuffling feet, seeming to chase round and round under the trees. They were strange sounds of lowered, suppressed voices, exclamations, and smothered joyous cries. It seemed actually like the laughter of young things, the uncontrollable laughter of children, who were trying not to be heard, but who, in a moment or so, as their excitement mounted, would burst forth. What in heaven's name was he dreaming of? What in heaven's name did he hear? Was he losing his reason and thinking? He heard things which were not for human ears. Was it that was it that the far clear voice had meant? And then the moment came, the uncontrollable moment when the sounds forgot to hush themselves. The feet ran faster and faster. They were nearing the garden door. There was quick, strong, young breathing and wild outbreak of laughing shows which could not be contained, and the door in the wall was flung wide open, the sheet of ivy swinging back, and a boy burst through it at full speed and without seeing the outsider dashed almost into his arms. Mr. Craven had extended them just in time to save him from falling as a result of his unseen dash against him, and when he held him away to look at him in amazement as at his being there, he truly gasped for breath. He was a tall boy and a handsome one. He was glowing with life, and his running had sent splendid color leaping to his face. He threw the thick hair back from his forehead and lifted a pair of strange gray eyes full of boyish laughter and rimmed with black lashes like a fringe. It was the eyes which made Mr. Craven gasp for breath. "Who? What? Who?" he stammered. Remember, his eyes looked like his mom's. This was not what Colin had expected. This was not what he had planned. He had never thought of such a meeting, and yet to come dashing out, winning a race, perhaps it was even better. He drew himself up to his very tallest. Mary, who had been running with him and had dashed through the door too, believed that he managed to make himself look taller than he had ever looked before, inches taller. "Father," he said, "I'm Colin. You can't believe it. I scarcely can myself. I'm Colin." Like Mrs. Medlock, he did not understand what his father meant when he said hurriedly, "In the garden, in the garden." "Yes," hurried on Colin. "It was the garden that did it, and Mary and Dickon and the creatures and the magic. No one knows. We kept it to tell you when you came. I'm well. I can beat Mary in a race. I'm going to be an athlete." He said it all so like a healthy boy. His face flushed, his words tumbling over each other in his eagerness, that Mr. Craven's soul shook with unbelieving joy. Colin put out his hand and laid it on his father's arm. "Aren't you glad, Father?" he ended. "Aren't you glad? I'm going to live forever and ever and ever." Mr. Craven put his hands on both the boy's shoulders and held him still. He knew he dared not even try to speak for a moment. "Take me into the garden, my boy," he said at last, "and tell me all about it." And so they let him in. The place was a wilderness of autumn gold, can't you just see it? And purple and violet blue and flaming scarlet, and on every side were sheaves of late lilies standing together. Lilies were white or white and ruby. He remembered well when the first of them had been planted that just at this season of the year their late glories should reveal themselves. Late roses climbed and hung and clustered in the sunshine, deepening the hue of the yellowing trees, made one feel that one stood in an embowered temple of gold. The newcomer stood silent, just as the children had done when they came into its grayness. He looked round and round. "I thought it would be dead," he said. "Mary thought so at first," said Colin, "but it came alive." They sat down under their tree, all but Colin, who waited to stand while he told the story. It was the strangest thing he had ever heard, Archibald Craven thought, as it was poured forth in headlong boy fashion. Mystery and magic and wild creatures, the weird midnight meeting, The coming of the spring, the passion of insulted pride, which had dragged the young Rajah to his feet to defy old Ben Weatherstaff to his face. The odd companionship, the play acting, their great secret so carefully kept. The listener laughed until tears came into his eyes, and sometimes tears came into his eyes when he was not laughing. The athlete, the lecturer, the scientific discoverer was a laughable, lovable, healthy, young human thing. Now, he said at the end of the story, it need not be a secret anymore. I dare say it will frighten them nearly into fits when they see me, but I'm never going to get in that chair again. I shall walk back with you, Father, to the house. Ben Weatherstaff's duties rarely took him away from the gardens, but on this occasion he made an excuse to carry some vegetables to the kitchen, and being invited into the servants' hall by Mrs. Medlock to drink a glass of beer, he was on the spot, as he had hoped to be when the most dramatic event Misselthwaite Manor had seen during the present generation actually took place. One of the windows looking upon the courtyard gave also a glimpse of the lawn. Mrs. Medlock, knowing Ben had come from the gardens, hoped that he might have caught sight of his master, and even by chance of his meeting with Master Colin. "Did you see either of them, Weatherstaff?" she asked. Ben took his beer mug from his mouth and wiped his lips with the back of his hand. "Aye, that I did," he answered with a shrewdly significant air. "Both of them?" suggested Mrs. Medlock. "Both of them," returned Ben Weatherstaff. "Thank you kindly, ma'am. I could sup up another mug of it." "Together?" said Mrs. Medlock, hastily overfilling his beer mug in her excitement. "Together, ma'am," and Ben gulped down half of his new mug at one gulp. "Where was Master Colin? How did he look? What did they say to each other?" "I didn't hear that," said Ben, only being on the stepladder looking over the wall. "But I'll tell thee this, there's been things going on outside as you house people knows nowt about. And what thou'll find out, thou'll find out soon." And it was not 2 minutes before he swallowed the last of his beer and waved his mug solemnly toward the window, which took in through the shrubbery a piece of the lawn. "Look there," he said. "If thou's curious, look what's coming across the grass." When Mrs. Medlock looked, she threw up her hands and gave a little shriek, and every man and woman servant within hearing bolted across the servants' hall and stood looking through the window with their eyes almost starting out of their heads. Across the lawn came the master of Misselthwaite, and he looked as many of them had never seen him, and by his side, with his head up in the air and his eyes full of laughter, walked as strongly and steadily as any boy in Yorkshire, Master Colin. The end. About the author. It's just a little bit. It went away. Francis Hodgson Burnett, 1849 to 1924. Was a popular British-American novelist and playwright born to relative influence in Massachusetts, England. Manchester, England, And that's where our Jan Carruthers lives. I'm not sure she's from there, but that's where she lives. After the death of her father and a reversal of fortune, Francis's mother immigrated to the United States with her family and settled near Knoxville, Tennessee. It's not far from me. It was here at the age of 19 where Frances began a modest career in writing to help support her family. 5 years later, she married Dr. Swan Burnett, and she soon established herself as one of the most popular novelists of her era. I'm done. Now what are we going to do? Oh, my goodness. It looks like I'm going to have to make an executive decision, and I so wanted y'all to vote. And you know what it says is next? Little Women. Well, what do you say about Little Women, guys? We had several votes for it. And then someone said, and they even told me who said it, now forget again. I'm terrible, y'all. Someone said Little Men, which we would need to read Little Women first. No, I'm not even sure if I have that yet. Oh, talk amongst yourselves. You're not live, so you can't do that. What is today? Thursday. So I'll be live tomorrow at 5 Eastern. So I hope you guys can join me. And if you can't, I hope you're watching the replays. And there's another good one too, Where the Red Fern Grows. I used to read that to my 7th graders. That's a tearjerker, that one is. Oh my goodness, here's Little Women. There was one, where's my wish list? I'm sorry that this is taking a while. I think it was Kelly said today, have your stuff ready. But I talk to you while I'm doing my Kindle thing, and I tell you, this really, the end of this really crept up on me. It did. It did. Where are my book wish list? My book wish list. This is Amazon Prime wish list. That ain't right. Okay, go back. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Eat your supper or something. 7:54 my time. Also, some of you mentioned several of the Bronte stories, like Wuthering Heights. Some of those. Let me just search. Little Women. And please don't be discouraged if this wasn't your vote. Or what you wanted to read. I'm sorry. I should have checked. Because next time I'll do better and make sure that I'll make sure I know when the end's coming so we can take a poll. And of course, October will be coming up, and somebody mentioned, shoot, my memory is gone, y'all know that, but mentioned reading the classic horror for the month of October, which I think is a fantastic idea. But I don't know, like Dracula and Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Okay, I just got it. Now where did it go? Come on. Come on. Okay, here we go. I hope you won't be disappointed. I don't think you will. Little Women is a classic. And hang in there, Madonna, and other folks who want us to read To Kill a Mockingbird. I would love to do that too, but we have to. It would take too long for me to check on that right now. So if somebody would check on that, I'll check on it when I finish this too. But I'll wait till you guys are gone. Okay, this book, I will look at the table of contents first, has 47 chapters. I think that'll take us pretty much through the month. Maybe we'll see. And see how long the chapters are. Chapter 1 is called Playing Pilgrims. Okay, Miss Katerina Junior Squirrel and other squirrels, we are starting a new book, Little Women. Playing Pilgrims. Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents, grumbled Joe, lying on the rug. It's so dreadful to be poor, sighed Meg, looking down at her old dress. I don't think it's fair for some girls to have plenty of pretty things and other girls nothing at all, added little Amy with an injured sniff. We've got father and mother and each other, said Beth contentedly from her corner. The 4 young faces on which the firelight shone brightened at the cheerful words, but darkened again as Joe said sadly, We haven't got father, and shall not have him for a long time. She didn't say, perhaps never, but each silently added it, thinking of father far away where the fighting was. Nobody spoke for a moment, and then Meg said in an altered tone, You know the reason Mother proposed not having any presents this Christmas was because it was going to be a hard winter for everyone, and she thinks we ought not to spend money for pleasure when our men are suffering so in the army. We can't do much, but we can make our little sacrifices and ought to do it gladly. But I'm afraid I don't. And Meg shook her head as she thought regretfully of all the pretty things she wanted. But I don't think the little we should spend would do any good. We've each got $1, and the army wouldn't be much help by our giving that. I agree not to expect anything from Mother or you, but I do want to buy Undine and Cintran for myself. I've wanted it so long, said Joe, who was a bookworm. I plan to spend mine in music, said Beth with a little sigh, which no one heard but the hearth brush and kettle holder. I shall get a nice box of Faber's drawing pencils. I really need them, said Amy decidedly. Mother didn't say anything about our money, and she won't wish us to give up everything. Let's each buy what we want and have a little fun. I'm sure we work hard enough to earn it, cried Joe, examining the heels of her shoes in a gentlemanly manner. I know I do, teaching those tiresome children nearly all day when I'm longing to enjoy myself at home, began Meg, in the complaining tone again. You don't have half such a hard time as I do, said Joe. How would you like to be shut up for hours with a nervous, fussy old lady who keeps you trotting, is never satisfied, and worries you till you're ready to fly out the window or cry? It's naughty to fret, but I do think washing dishes and keeping things tidy is the worst work in the world. It makes me cross and my hands get so stiff I can't practice well at all. And Beth looked at her rough hands with a sigh that anyone could hear that time. I don't believe any of you suffer as I do, cried Amy, for you don't have to go to school with impertinent girls who plague you if you don't know your lessons, and laugh at your dresses, and label your father if he isn't rich, and insult you when your nose isn't nice. If you mean libel, I'd say so, and not talk about labels as if Papa was a pickle bottle, advised Joe, laughing. I know what I mean, and you needn't be satirical about it. It's proper to use good words and improve your vocabulary, returned Amy with dignity. Don't peck at one another, children. Don't you wish we had the money Papa lost when we were little, Joe? Dear me, how happy and good we'd be if we had no worries. Oh, wouldn't it be? I'm so blessed, though. If we had no worries, said Meg, who could remember better times. You said the other day you thought we were a deal happier than the King children, for they were fighting and fretting all the time in spite of their money. So I did, Beth. Well, I think we are, for though we do have to work, we make fun of ourselves and are a pretty jolly set, as Joe would say. Joe does use such slang words, observed Amy with a reproving look at the long figure stretched on the rug. Joe immediately sat up, put her hands in her pockets, and began to whistle. Don't, Joe, it's so boyish. That's why I do it. I detest rude, unladylike girls. I hate affected, niminy-piminy chits. Birds in their little nest agree, sang Beth, the peacemaker, with such a funny face that both sharp voices softened to a laugh, and the pecking ended for that time. Really, girls, you're both to be blamed, said Meg, beginning to lecture in her elder sisterly fashion. You're old enough to leave off boyish tricks and to behave better, Josephine. It didn't matter so much when you were a little girl, but now you're so tall and turn up your hair, you should remember that you are a young lady. I'm not, and if turning up my hair makes me one, I'll wear it in 2 tails till I'm 20, cried Joe, pulling off her net and shaking down a chestnut mane. I hate to think I've got to grow up and be Miss March and wear long gowns and look as prim as a China aster. It's bad enough to be a girl anyway. When I like boys' games and work and manners, I can't get over my disappointment in not being a boy. And it's worse than ever now, for I'm dying to go and fight with Papa, and I can only stay home and knit. Madonna. Oh, you'll love this next. Like a pokey old woman. And Joe shook the blue army sock till the needles rattled like castanets and her ball bounded across the room. Poor Joe. It's too bad, but it can't be helped, so you must try to be contented with making your name boyish. Josephine, and she goes by Joe, J-O. Which makes me think of JoJo, our little Josephine squirrel, and our friend JoJo from Joe's Web, from whence that came. Okay. She must buy and playing brother to us girls, said Beth, stroking the rough head with a hand that all the dishwashing and dusting in the world could not make ungentle in its touch. As for you, Amy, continued Meg, you are altogether too particular and prim. Your airs are funny now, but you'll grow up an affected little goose if you don't take care. I like your nice manners and refined ways of speaking when you don't try to be elegant, but your absurd words, like vocabulary, are as bad as Joe's slang. If Joe is a tomboy and Amy is a goose, what am I? Asked Beth, ready to share the lecture. You're a dear and nothing else, answered Meg warmly, and no one contradicted her, for the mouse was and mouse is in quotation marks, was the pet of the family. As young readers like to know how people look, we will take this moment to give them a little sketch of the 4 sisters who sat knitting away in the twilight while the December snow fell quietly without and the fire crackled cheerfully within. It was a comfortable room, though the carpet was faded and the furniture very plain. For a good picture or 2 hung on the walls. Books filled the recesses. Chrysanthemums and Christmas roses bloomed in the windows, and a pleasant atmosphere of home peace pervaded it. Margaret, the eldest of the 4, was 16 and very pretty, being plump and fair with large eyes, plenty of soft brown hair, a sweet mouth, and white hands, of which she was rather vain. 15-year-old Joe was very tall, thin, and brown, and reminded one of a colt, for she never seemed to know what to do with her long limbs, which were very much in her way. She had a decided mouth, a comical nose, and sharp gray eyes which appeared to see everything, and were by turns fierce, funny, or thoughtful. Her long, thick hair was her one beauty, but it was usually bundled into a net to be out of her way. Round shoulders had Joe, big hands and feet, a flyaway look to her clothes, and the uncomfortable appearance of a girl who was rapidly shooting up into a woman and didn't like it. Elizabeth, or Beth, as everyone called her, was a rosy, smooth-haired, bright-eyed girl of 13, with a shy manner, a timid voice, and a peaceful expression which was seldom disturbed. Her father called her Little Miss Tranquility, for the name suited her excellently, for she seemed to live in a happy world of her own, only venturing out to meet the few whom she trusted and loved. Amy, though the youngest, was a most important person in her own opinion, at least. A regular snow maiden with blue eyes and yellow hair curling on her shoulders, pale and slender, and always carrying herself like a young lady, mindful of her manners. What the characters of the four sisters were, we will leave to be found out. The clock struck 6, and having swept up the hearth, Beth put a pair of slippers down to warm. Somehow the sight of the old shoes had a good effect upon the girls, for Mother was coming, and everyone brightened to welcome her. Meg stopped lecturing, lighted the lamp. Amy got out of the easy chair without being asked, and Jo forgot how tired she was as she sat up to hold the slippers nearer to the blaze. They are quite worn out. Marmee, that's their mom, must have a new pair. I thought I'd get her some with my dollar, said Beth. No, I shall, cried Amy. I'm the oldest, began Meg, but Jo cut in with a decided, I'm the man of the family. Now Papa is away, and I shall provide the slippers, for he told me to take special care of Mother while he was gone. I tell you what we'll do, said Beth. Let's each get her something for Christmas, and not get anything for ourselves. That's like you, dear. What will we get? Exclaimed Jo. Everyone thought soberly for a minute, and then Meg announced, as if the idea was suggested by the sight of her own pretty hands, I shall give her a nice pair of gloves. Army shoes, best to be had, cried Jo. Some handkerchiefs, all hemmed, said Beth, which makes me think of my beautiful handkerchiefs, which I used to dab from our girl Tracy in England. Let's see. I'll get a little bottle of cologne. She likes it, and it won't cost much, so I'll have some left to buy my pencils, added Amy. How will we give the things? Asked Meg. Put them on the table and bring her in and let her see the bundles. Don't you remember how we used to do on our birthdays? Answered Jo. I used to be so frightened when it was my turn to sit in the chair with the crown on and see you all marching round to give the presents with a kiss. I liked the things in the kisses, but it was dreadful to have you sit looking at me while I opened the bundle, said Beth, who was toasting her face. And the bread for tea at the same time by the fire. Let Marmee think we're getting things for ourselves and then surprise her. We must go shopping tomorrow afternoon, Meg. There's so much to do about the play for Christmas night, said Jo, marching up and down with her hands behind her back and her nose in the air. I don't mean to act any more after this time. I'm getting too old for such things, observed Meg, who was as much a child as ever about dressing up frolics. You won't stop, I know, as long as you can trail around in a white gown with your hair down and wear gold paper jewelry. You're the best actress we've got, and there'll be an end of everything if you quit the board, said Jo. We ought to rehearse tonight. Come here, Amy, and do the fainting scene, for you are as stiff as a poker in that. I can't help it. I never saw anyone faint, and I don't choose to make myself all black and blue tumbling flat as you do. If I can go down easily, I'll drop. If I can't, I shall fall into a chair and be graceful. I don't care if Hugo does come at me with a pistol, returned Amy, who was not gifted with dramatic power, but was chosen because she was small enough to be borne out shrieking by the villain of the piece. Do it this way. Clasp your hands so and stagger across the room crying frantically, "Rodrigo, save me, save me." And away went Joe with a melodramatic scream, which was truly thrilling. Amy followed, but she poked her hands out stiffly before her and jerked herself long as if she went by machinery, and her "ow" was more suggestive of pins being run into her than of fear and anguish. Joe gave a despairing groan, and Meg laughed outright, while Beth let her bread burn as she watched the fun with interest. "It's no use. Do the best you can when the time comes, and if the audience laugh, don't blame me. Come on, Meg." Then things went smoothly, for Don Pedro defied the world in a speech of 2 pages without a single break. Hagar, the witch, chanted an awful incantation over her kettleful of simmering toads with weird effect. Rodrigo rent his chains asunder manfully, and Hugo died in agonies of remorse and arsenic with a wild "Ha ha!" "It's the best we've had yet," said Meg, as the dead villain sat up and rubbed his elbows. "I don't see how you can write and act such splendid things, Joe. You're a regular Shakespeare," exclaimed Beth, who firmly believed that her sisters were gifted with wonderful genius in all things. "Not quite," replied Joe modestly. "I do think The Witch's Curse, an operatic tragedy, is rather a nice thing, but I'd like to try Macbeth. If only we had a trap door for Banquo. I always wanted to do the killing part." "Is that a dagger I see before me?" muttered Joe, rolling her eyes and clutching at the air, as she had seen a famous tragedian do. I'm sorry, I am not up on my Shakespeare, so I'll probably slay that name. "No, it's the toasting fork with Mother's shoe on it instead of the bread. Oh no." "Best stage struck," cried Meg, and the rehearsal ended in a general burst of laughter. "Glad to find you so merry, my girls," said a cheery voice at the door, and actors and audience turned to welcome a tall, motherly lady with a "Can I help you" look about her, which was truly delightful. She was not elegantly dressed, but a noble-looking woman, and the girls thought the gray cloak and unfashionable bonnet covered the most splendid mother